Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our FlexPath learning format lets you learn on your own schedule. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. From fresh kicks to perfect gifts, there's always a find.
Levi's, Page, Frame, all the best denim.
Why do I rack? Because check out these boots.
I always score at Rack.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to find amazing deals on all things winter. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Motherhood. 1 minute, you're mom of the year.
I love you, Mommy.
Then the next, not so much. From bath time to bullying, from potty training to puberty, parenting is full of challenges. But one thing is for certain, you are not alone. Welcome to Modern Mom Probs. I'm your host, author, mother, parenting expert, Tara Clark. Join me while we tackle today's modern mom problems.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Modern Mom Probs. I'm your girl, Tara. Today we're talking about friendship and connection. I am joined by Jewel Hohman. She is a future therapist and overly certified coach and a human connection obsessed and imperfect human. That's really cute. With a degree in psychology and sociology, a pending master's in over 4,000 hours of coaching on connection, Jules combines evidence-based self-help and the latest friendship research to help people feel delightfully authentic in social settings and make their friendships more meaningful. In a post-pandemic world where millions of people are lonelier and more disconnected than ever, this conversation is urgent and often ignored, and Jewel is on a mission to change that. I'm so glad that she is here today. Jewel Hohman, welcome to the show. So I'm so glad that you appreciated that episode because I did it on a whim. I don't normally record solo podcast episodes, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to just go there and do it. And so I spoke for like 30 minutes straight, just laid it all out on the table. I'm sure I probably could have kept going, but I was like, people don't want to hear me for more than 30 minutes at a clip. So I ended it, but I'm glad that it resonated with you.
Yeah, no, it was so good. And I am not a parent myself, but as a woman, right, I have experienced some of that perfectionism of you need to be this type of way, but not that too much that type of way, just this much. And when you read, I believe, I can't remember her name, but when you read that woman's post from Threads, I was like, wow, does that like really paint the picture of this? And her just being like, yeah, you could get shamed about this, you get shamed about this. And so we could actually dive into that for what that looks like in friendship.
I would love that. I'm so excited that we're talking about friendship today because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. It really is. Last April, I spoke at a conference called Mom 2.0 about the power of community. And I'm such a proponent of friendship and community. And that's obviously why you're here today, Jewel. So yeah, let's dive into that.
Yeah. So women's friendships, like female friendship, it tends to actually be more fragile compared to men's, even though we are so much like more emotionally deep. Like women tend to have, like, even what we're doing right now, we tend to have like face to face, let me look at you, let me see you kind of conversations and interactions. And men tend to have side by side, let's focus on an activity. Let's do video games. Let's do sports. Let's do whatever this might be, right? And so why are female friendships more fragile? Well, there's a few different reasons for that, but I really think that one of them is that women often feel like they have so much on them and like so many standards. And especially if you are a mom, right? There's so many opinions. And so we get that from all of these areas of our lives that we have like very little tolerance for it when it comes to our friends, because that's such an elective relationship, right? And so I think we tend to end a friendship sometimes prematurely because we're like, I don't need this, because we get it in other areas of our lives. So we're like, nope, not having it. Like if it's not fueling me and investing in me and making my life better, I'm not going to do it. But I also think another way that this shows up, because the shame that you talked about also really relates right to the perfectionism, like how to be the perfect mom, how to be the perfect woman, how to be the perfect friend. And we often project that, ironically, onto our friends because it's so internalized for us, right? That we project that onto our friends. This was something when I started looking into like friendship, like science and research, and it was just for me, myself, and I, because I was like, okay, I was starting to experience what is, I now know is called like the friendship dip. And it's when you are in like your mid to late 20s and you, because I know I have like a very young voice, by the way, y'all, but I'm a little bit older. But when you get to your mid to late 20s, people start to get married. They do start having kids. That does change your friendships. But we go from spending so much time with our peers to really falling off and having this like dip with our friends. And that's normal. It's something for us to all be aware of. And I was experiencing that. And I had like tons of social anxiety growing up. I had tons of like feelings of loneliness even when I did have friends growing up. And I was starting to experience that. And I was like, I'm not dealing with this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to figure this out. So when I started looking into friendship science for me, myself, and and applying this to myself, that was one thing I had to hard check myself on, was I realized I was trying to look for the perfect friend. And you know how much connection that really robbed me of like, and it sounds like also, y'all, it sounds like so obvious and like probably so clear as I'm talking about it, but it was really subtle. Like, oh no, she doesn't like have these same beliefs like I do, or she doesn't have these goals, or we're in different life phases. Like it can sound things like that. But at the end of the day, I wanted connection, and connection is not predicated on any of those things.
I love that. And as you were saying that, I had several thoughts, but one of them is that it's not far off from dating to find the right life partner. Right? Because in your head, you're like, oh, well, he does this or he doesn't do that, or, you know, all of those things. But there's no such thing as the perfect life partner. There's no such thing as the perfect friend. Right. So that's where compromise comes in. That's where growing together in your relationship and your friendship come together. I think the science of friendship is so interesting. And in what you were saying about how women connect face to face and men connect side to side. Mm-hmm. And that is fascinating. Totally coincidentally, my husband and I were actually talking about that yesterday, about men connecting side to side as they're, you know, fishing or watching football or something like that. So it's weird that I'm having that. I heard that twice in 2 days, but that's how you know it's true. And there's a real, you know, there. Forgive my landscapers if you hear them in the back. So I'm really sorry about that. Because of course that happens like right now. But anyway, where was I going before I was talking about landscape arts? About friendship dip. Yes, I also experienced friendship dip in my, I guess that was early 30s. Because there's a time where, like you said, like people are getting married, they're having kids, like maybe you don't have kids at that time, maybe you're not married at that time, and you don't necessarily want to be like the third wheel, or you don't want to just like be invading in someone else's like situation there, right? So how do you navigate that friendship dip?
Yeah. I think a huge part of it, and this is just from like my experience, but I really think a part of it is we really look for, oh, what do I have in common with these people? And I think we often do that in a way that isn't very like proactive for our connections. So to give you an example, right? Like I am partnered. I'm starting to, you know, move on to this like next phase of my life where I am started to go to like getting married and things like that. And my like quote unquote like best friend, I don't like really love that term, but anyway, one of my best friends, she is not, and she is like going through a stage right now where she like has just gotten really confident. And she's like, I am going out and I've started to date and I'm starting to go out a lot more and I'm kind of over going out, you know? So for example, and people might look at us, and we also are very different personality wise. I mean, maybe not necessarily personality, but like interest, I would argue. So like she is really into for example, like she's really into Halloween, and she's one of those girls that just really identifies with like a darker aesthetic. She's such a light. So it's so funny to me. But I am not. I'm a little kooky. And so people might look at us and they might be like, oh, like they don't have like a ton in common, or like we're in different life phases. And I feel so connected to this person, but I'm also willing to look beyond those things, right? I'm looking and remembering those times when I started to feel really confident and good in my body and started to go out and date and meet people and like how fun that was. And so I can remember that, if you will, like phase of my life and connect with her on it. And we could even talk about things that we've noticed and how dating has changed. Like it's opened up this whole other level of connection. Same with me talking about my relationship and describing like what's different there. So I think, and one of actually my favorite examples is like a client of mine. She was saying, all my friends have kids. I'm very into my job. And that's just not something I'm not even sure if I want. And I really still want to be connected with these people. I've been friends with them for years. And her best friend was, she had just had a baby. And she just decided to become a stay-at-home mom. And my client had just gotten a promotion and was super nervous. And I was like, I wonder if y'all really do have something in common, though, like something you can relate on. Y'all are in places where you are creating new identities and having new roles and new systems, and how uncomfortable that is. She was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. So she went and connected with her friend, and she was like, wow, like I felt so connected to her, and like I was so curious about her experience. So I feel like we need to open up and understand like what connection really is, what compatibility really is, because yes, there is also like friendship compatibility as well. That is a thing. I'm not saying that you can't have any like standards for a friend. Like for me personally, I need someone who's emotionally intelligent. But I think we are too harsh on our friends when we are going through different life phases. We start to think things like, oh, she can't relate. She doesn't understand. And I think we all just need to be aware of that. And then when it comes to a friendship that we've had for a really long time, a friendship that is fulfilling, that we have investment in, because truthfully, a friendship is an investment of time, energy, emotions. I think it's worth putting in that effort to go beyond, oh, what are our current life stages right now? I think if you are a new mom and maybe you are like the first of your friend group, for example, I think this also comes from communication. We don't treat our friendships the same way we do our partnerships. And I had somebody check me recently and they were like, not everybody even does this in their partnerships, Jewel. And I was like, oh yeah. But
it's true.
Right? I was like, oh yeah. But communicating and being clear of like, okay, here's where I'm at and here's how I want to connect. That is very vulnerable. And even as women, we will dissect our childhood traumas together. We will go through everything. We will talk about everything together. One of the most vulnerable things we can do, y'all, in our friendships is to talk about the friendship itself. So if you are a new mom and your friends aren't, there might be some underlining, like they don't know what to say. They also, I think, might be afraid of like, oh, I don't want to like shame you on accident if, you know, they're like conscious of the standards on women, right? But that might also have them be uncomfortable, not say much. So I think it's important for you to say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what my experience is like right now. And these relationships are important to me. Where can we meet in the middle to like keep this investment going? Y'all, that right there makes such a difference in your friendships because it allows you to have that trust of, oh, we're going to work on things together. So I think when you do start going through the friendship dip, one, again, remember it's normal. There's nothing to be ashamed about. Two, if you're looking to make new friends, that's something we could talk about in a minute. But I really think three, we want to communicate with our people. We want to be open four, we want to be open for connection as well and start looking beyond what are like our current life circumstances.
Yeah, beautifully said, Jewel. It really is. You actually led me to my next thought. I wanted to ask about making new friends because there's something that I hear over and over again from my community is, how do you make mom friends? It's really hard. And motherhood, particularly in the beginning, can be very lonely. I know, as you actually had mentioned, I was the first of my friends to have a baby. So I did not have that built-in group. And it's lonely in your home, in the house with the baby. And my thing was that I got out of the house and went to the park as much as I could. So I would meet people at the playground. I met people at the park. Sometimes you just need another human being, adult human being to talk with, right?
Yeah.
And so something that I hear time and time again is, how do I make mom friends?
Yeah. And I love what you described of like going to the park. Y'all, and this is true for everybody, whether you are a mom or not. We live in an age right now where it's easier to turn on friends instead of hanging out with your own, like the show. It's easier to like numb out on like scrolling TikTok. It's easy to do those things rather than to take the small little discomfort to be around other people. So I actually think if everybody could take a page from what you just described of like going to the park and being around people, because truthfully, why I do what I do and why I made this my career is I'm worried about everybody's like social fitness, if you will, like their ability to go out and connect, because we as a nation, probably even globally in some parts of the world, like we have become more and more like isolated. Our culture has become more and more isolated. So everybody, like your social fitness is also self-care. It's just as important. And Tara gave a really great example of that. So how to make new mom friends is, I think it might be helpful to understand like what friendship is or like what it comes from. So Shasta Nelson, she's like the OG like friendship expert researcher. And she put this research together so beautifully. So if everybody can like imagine a triangle, so the bottom of the triangle, let's say those are your acquaintances. And then as you move up the triangle, like up, like move a little bit up towards the point, maybe you're just in the middle though, that's like your good friends. And then your pinnacle, the people at the top, those are like your confidants. Your confidants, your closest people, the people that you can call when you're feeling lonely, just because you're feeling lonely and they want to be there for you, right? They want to hear about it. Those people. So how we move somebody from acquaintance to that pinnacle, to a confidant level, are through three things. So keeping our triangle in mind, the base of the triangle is positive interactions or meaningful moments. And when I say positive, I don't mean that everybody is like elated and feeling amazing. Like it doesn't have to be that you are feeling at your best. A positive interaction is just, I feel seen. I feel heard. It could literally be you going and crying to a friend and feeling supported. That's a positive interaction. So that's our base. And then we move somebody up through, like if you can imagine the sides, like starting from the bottom and like pointing up to the pinnacle, through two things, through consistency and vulnerability. Now, whenever I say this, Tara, people are always like, oh, another thing I have to be consistent about. Gross.
As if we don't have enough things that we need to be consistent about every day.
Right. So what I want to offer, one, y'all, it's really fun. And two, let me break it out so it's a little bit easier. So consistency can really be broken down into two parts. It's really frequency and history. It's basically the time that you have invested in a friendship. Now, when I say history, this is why so many of us have a friend that we've had since kindergarten, college, and we don't talk to her all of the time, but we feel so close to her, right? We have
absolutely.
Yeah. And everybody tells me, like, they're like, I want another low maintenance friendship. And I'm like, you got it. That's an investment. That's a return on investment, babes. Like you have invested into that. So yeah, that kind of friendship happens because you have a lot of history. You have a lot of positive interactions, a lot of history of vulnerability with this person. Now, so that's one part of consistency. The other part is frequency. This is why we become so close to our coworkers. We see them every day. So again, consistency, if you think about it, is time invested. One thing that I did, because I was learning all of this at like the very beginning of the pandemic and applying this to my life at the very beginning of the pandemic. Y'all remember the global one where we were all shut down? So
How could we forget, Jewel? It's like burned into our brain. We're like, that one 4 years ago where everyone was just in their house completely isolated? Yes. Yeah, that one.
So wild. So wild. It was almost 5 years ago at this point. Isn't that wild? It's so crazy.
It is wild, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bananas.
So I was doing this then. And so one thing I made sure, because I was like, how am I going to get time with people? Like I can only do so many FaceTimes in a day. And I'm really trying to create meaningful friendships. One thing that I did, and we all like COVID tested before we went, but I planned girls trips because that is a lot of time with somebody. And I did it, y'all, with, again, like people that I wasn't super close with. And it was so fun. So that's like a little hack. But really this time invested, this consistency, it's the consistency of me seeing you, interacting with you, knowing you were a safe space. That is so important for our brains. Our brains need to know, oh, this is a trusted person. This person's really familiar. And then we increase a friendship with the other side of vulnerability. Now, I also get a couple of reactions whenever I am teaching this to people. And that is one, they're like, oh, heck yeah. Let's get really vulnerable. Let's talk about all the things. Let's dissect all of our childhood trauma, Or they're like, oh, gross. Like, I do not want to do that. That does not sound fun. And here's what I offer for vulnerability. Because again, we're not going straight from acquaintance to let me tell you all of my childhood trauma so that way you know every little single thing about me and that we can be best friends. I actually, before I learned this, thought that that's what friendship was. And that was my strategy. And it doesn't work, y'all. Like I was basically trauma dumping on all these coffee dates, thinking like, oh, if you know everything about me, we will be best friends. That is not the case. It's a combination of these three things. So for vulnerability, one way I like to think about it in an incremental way is it's just seeing more of them and them seeing more of you. Right? And so if you have a coworker, for example, that you're building a lot of frequency with, y'all are, joking around, you're venting about your bosses, that's, have some positive interactions. And if they come over to your house after work, that's vulnerable. Because they're seeing you outside of work. They're seeing the way you kick off your shoes. They're seeing the way you choose to decorate your home. They're seeing, your catch-all and how you maybe just throw all the mail
throw
in
all
there.
The keys.
Yeah, the keys and everything. And so that's vulnerable. So I think when it comes to somebody making mom friends, what we want to do is we want to apply that science, right? And so it's really helpful to join clubs. Book clubs honestly hit all three of those things like easy peasy beautiful because it has built-in consistency, and especially for a mom, that maybe has a lot on her brain, has a lot of mental load. That is really helpful to go to a club because that it's, weekly or bi-weekly, and that's just on your calendar. You could go do that. So that way you're not having to plan things all the time. I find that's really helpful. But I think one thing, if somebody's saying, oh, it's really hard to make mom friends, I'm imagining that maybe they live somewhere where I live, where it's like suburbia and it's really spread out, and maybe there aren't a ton of clubs everywhere. And what I want to offer is that you can find connection in an instant anywhere. Like, you could find people in that community that are like moms, and it doesn't have to be new moms. Because again, some of this might be that projected, like, oh, the perfect friend kind of thing. So don't discount a mom, maybe if her kids are a bit older, or if somebody is pregnant and, the baby's not here yet, like you just being mindful of things like that. I think it's really important to have a mom friend, if you will, to have somebody that you can talk about like your shared experiences, your common experiences that is connective. Don't get me wrong. But also if you are in this space where you are really feeling lonely and you need more connection, as you are, reaching out to people in your community or attending clubs, also still make time for your established connections. those are going to be the most fueling for you as you are building these new ones, because those are the ones where you have a lot of history and vulnerability and positive interactions built up. So that connection is going to be really meaningful. And that's what you really need right now. I think anybody needs right now when they're feeling really lonely.
Yeah, that is such great advice. While you were talking about the trauma dumping with your friends, I was laughing to myself because anytime that I have a girls' weekend, that's like all we do for like the entire time. I can think of at least 2 different girls' weekends where, now keep in mind, a lot of my friends are content creators also. So I wasn't sure if it was just like a content creator thing where the people are so accustomed to just being like, here, I'm going to trauma dump, here's my life story and all that kind of stuff. And if it was just sort of like a thing because of what we do for a living. But now that you're saying that, I think maybe that's just like the case across the board.
Yeah, again, I thought that was the answer, and it's not that it doesn't build trust on some level. Like, one thing I loved about your episode last week was you were like, okay, if an expert's saying something, like, take what works for you, apply it to you, right? Take what is helpful for you and then, leave the rest. And so I don't want anybody to leave here and to start being like, oh no, do I like trauma dump? That is not the goal. It can still be connective to share stories and things like that. However, when we're starting with somebody at like an acquaintance level, I don't want you to have the expectation I did, because I was so confused. I was like, do I not have 1,000 best friends? I went on like 3 coffee dates last week and told everyone my whole life story. What is happening? So
I get that, because there's sort of like, I guess I would almost call it a meme about how like new moms often trauma dump at the playground meeting people. And like, that's their attempt to make new mom friends. And they're like, let me tell you about my birth story. And it'll be like this crazy, like gory story, and they're like, I don't know why everyone keeps running away. And so like, it's like that, what you're saying about the coffee. I it's funny for me personally, like when I meet new people, I am a big question asker. I don't know if I'm making that up as a term. So I always get other people talking about themselves. I very rarely divulge anything of myself unless someone asks me. And then obviously, of course, then I'll tell a story. But I like to get people going and keep people going. And that's my strategy. I've taught my husband that. I've taught my son that. If you want to make friends, have other people talk about themselves. And 9 times out of 10, they absolutely love it. And they're just going to keep going. But only until we have the sleepovers with the girls' weekends do I do the trauma dump. Like I don't do it at the coffee meeting level. I do it at the sleepover. It's, midnight and we're all in matching pajamas. And then now I'm going to tell you about my life.
Oh yeah. No, that's probably a lot healthier too, Tara. That's
the vulnerability that comes into, that we're in a place together, sitting on the couch, as opposed to hanging out in Starbucks together.
Exactly.
So remind me what those 3 ones are again. It's vulnerability, frequency, and consistency.
Yeah. Vulnerability, consistency, and positivity. So this
positivity.
So positivity, I like to say meaningful moments, because positivity can kind of trip people up a little bit.
Sure.
But it really means like positive interaction. So the reason why that one is really important, so that one's our base. And then the other 2, consistency and vulnerability, really build up to the pinnacle. But that base is so important, because what happens for a lot of people is, they start to have a lot of history built up, a lot of consistency built up, a lot of vulnerability, and somebody's really high on their triangle, if you will. And then they start to feel really unfulfilled in a friendship. It's more likely that what happened is the interaction stopped feeling as good. And we need 5 positive interactions to counter every one. So in a situation like that, because we've all had that, right? Everybody's had a friendship where they feel like, oh, this isn't as like fulfilling as it once was, or, maybe you're going through a conflict right now. So that's the time where, we need to have some communications or start to prioritize other people.
Yeah. But what happens when like a friendship dissolves. Like there's a couple different ways for friendships to sort of go away. Like I've had experiences where, I mean, this one is a bizarre story, but where the friendship people just straight up stopped communicating. And then everyone just like poof and kind of like went away. And so there's that. And then there's other ones where maybe you start to hang out with people less and less, or there's maybe a time where there's like an actual blow up and actual conflict. So like how do people navigate those? Can I tell you my story real fast?
Yeah,
I can't believe
please.
I'm telling this like publicly, but I'll share it publicly. So there was a friend that I had, and she and I were very close, and we were friends for years. And I don't know how it even happened that for her birthday, I had dropped off a birthday gift and saw her, for a few minutes, whatever. And we hung out at her house. And then my birthday was only a few weeks later, maybe about 3 weeks later. She had texted me that she was going to drop off my birthday present. And then she never did. And then I never heard from her again. And we haven't spoken. And it's been nearly 3 years. Almost 3 years, 2.5 years. But the thing is, it's like, I don't want to reach out and she hasn't reached out. And so then like nobody's reached out, and it's sort of become like a cold war or a war of attrition where like neither side is reaching out. But like I've moved on, I move on pretty quickly with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And even my husband's like, that's the strangest thing. I was like, you're telling me? I was like, I don't know what happened. I actually have no idea what happened. Still to this day, I have no idea what happened. All I know is that she said she was going to drop off my birthday gift, and then I never heard from her again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, who can know, right? Like in that kind of situation where you've had no communication from this person on like what was going on. That story is really interesting. And I also think it actually is a really good point, or a really good example of what I was about to say, which is I can't give somebody like because you asked what happens when friendship dissolves, like how to handle that. There is no right or wrong answer, because we're all dynamic human beings that have unique friendships with each other and different dynamics. So like for that example, like what you just gave, like it's really up to you. And you said you were like, I moved on. Like I don't want to reach out. And those are your boundaries. That's where you are at. And I mean, that friendship just dissolves that way. I think something for everybody to be mindful of is that it's really easy, especially today, to end a friendship. And what I mean by that is not to scare anybody, but something for you to be mindful of. Like friendships do take some effort. They do take some discomfort. And look, like I know all of y'all listening, you're like, oh, but I already have like 1,000 things to do. The reason why I was so excited to talk to Tara about this today is because this is so important. And I'll get into that rant in a second. But when it comes to friendships dissolving, I think it's something for all of us to be mindful of how do I want to communicate with this person? If I do, in a situation like that, you might not want to. You might be like you just said, you might not want to because you're like, okay, that was strange. If you can't, communicate with me, or, you had other priorities, like clearly something was going on with that person and we just don't know.
I don't know. And then she unfollowed me on Instagram, which I know sounds stupid, but to me, that was like the nail in the coffin of our not being friends anymore. Because I still to this day have absolutely no idea what happened. Yeah. And then she unfollowed me and I was like, that's the strangest thing. And so I have no idea. And even they live near us, and she and her husband were walking one day, and my husband is still friends with her husband. And we waved at the husband, and like he waved back and she didn't. And she was like super mad that he waved. And so we have
Yeah.
No idea. And even when the husbands had gotten together, probably about a year ago, it might have been like last Christmas. And my husband, I don't know, maybe they brought it up. They went to breakfast together. And I think like as they were walking back to their cars, like maybe my husband brought it up or something like that. And then the other husband was like, I don't know, you know how women are. And my husband's like, no, I don't. Actually, I don't know how women are. Like, this is a really weird situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I still, like I said, I still to this day don't understand how or why that went down the way it did. But again, like I'm not going to reach out. I'm not, because I didn't think that I was wrong in that situation. So I don't know. It's very strange. It's super strange.
And people are strange sometimes, honestly, right? They don't communicate, or something happens and they don't express. I think what everybody can take from this, though, is by you sharing that, because there's some woman listening that's her fear, right? And y'all could hear it. Like I could see it in Tara's face. She's like giggling about it. She's like, I don't know. Like it's very curious. And I'm not saying that these things shouldn't hurt, but I'm saying that it's not the end of the world, because sometimes I think for other women, when it comes to befriending other women, that we can be like, oh, they're going to abandon me because I'm not good enough. They're going to think I'm not good enough. They're going to, judge me really harshly. They're going to be catty, right? We get all these messages about women all the time that we project onto other women. Like, I cannot tell you, it happens at least once a week, without fail, probably for the last 2 years, once a week. One of my clients says to me, but I don't feel safe around other women, like emotionally. Right? Why is that?
It's sad. I know, it's sad.
So
they're judgy.
Yeah. We're afraid of them being judgy, and sometimes they are, right? We just talked about sometimes we project onto each other, but there are a lot of women out there that are very accepting and nourishing and that want this sisterhood too, and that are also afraid. And so when you come across somebody that, maybe isn't emotionally mature enough to communicate and just says, yeah, I'll drop off your present, and then ghosts you after that and unfollows you on Instagram, right? You're not dealing with an emotionally mature person. And so now you know. But it doesn't have to be the end of the world. Yeah. And so
I still laugh thinking about that, because I'm like, it just seems like, and I know like saying the words out loud and sharing the story with you publicly is just so strange to me, because I'm like, how did that happen? What happened there? I still don't know. My husband and I, like I said, we often say, what happened? None of it made sense.
Yeah. And I just think everybody listening, they can take from that though, and they can not make it mean anything about them. Just like y'all can hear it in Tara's like explanation. She's like, what happened? It's very clearly like, what went on with her? Like, what was going on there? And, not making it mean something about you and who you are, because it doesn't. Other people are just strange sometimes.
Yeah, no, they are. And it's interesting. Like excuse me, I had to cough there for a second. We spoke about, being, let's say, in our late 20s, before marriages or anything like that. We spoke about new mothers and mothers finding friends. And now the interesting thing is my mother now is retired, and her friends were always her work colleagues, and she never really had outside friends. And so when she retired, she was like, who am I going to talk to now? And so I encouraged her, and luckily she listened, to join as many clubs as possible. And now she has her friends. But going back to what you said earlier about not being too judgmental on these people that you're meeting, or having, too high of standards, I often remind her, she's like, oh, but this one does this and this and this. And I'm like, Mommy, like nobody's perfect. No friendship is perfect. And sometimes she's like, well, why are they asking me too many questions? I'm like, sometimes people ask questions. She hates being asked questions. I'm like, sometimes people ask questions because they're trying to get to know you as a friend. They want to be your friend and get to know you better, see what kind of similarities you have together. And so I think that making friends is a lifelong thing. It's not just, when you're 30 years old, and it's not just when you're 35 years old, and it's when you're 65 years old, right? And so the certain skills that we acquire in making friendships can carry us literally throughout our lives. And my mom never really had to go out and make friends in the way that she is now having to go out and make friends, because her friends were always those, you see them every day, work acquaintances and work friends.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because I think one thing that prevents women or anybody in general from investing in their communities, in their friendships, is because they're like, it might not work out anyway. And one thing that we do know is that research shows that our friendships change every 7 years. And what that means is not that you have like completely different friends every 7 years, but maybe somebody that was a best friend, a confidant to you, is now more of just like a friend. And maybe somebody that was an acquaintance is now a confidant. And you maybe, some people left the triangle, if you will, and some other new people came. That is normal. That's part of the process. And honestly, I think that's what can make friendship so beautiful sometimes. Like, I know myself, I have, had really close confidant level friends. And then, like when I went away to college and things like that, they became just like good friends. And now they're really close friends again. They're confidant levels again. So I think it's this fluidity of friendship that, one, can be really beautiful and really nourishing, but I think also really makes a lot of people think, oh, well, if it's temporary or if it's fluid, like, why invest in these relationships? And I think I would guess, I don't know, but I would guess with your mom that maybe she felt really lonely. Y'all, that is a huge, huge impact on us. I can't remember who exactly found this, but some studies show that loneliness is just as hard on your body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Loneliness that has like such a huge impact on our body. Our bodies respond to stress so differently, where it hurts us so much more when we're feeling lonely compared to when we're feeling connected. There's 1,000 things I could say. And so I think I'm not trying to put any pressure on any mom being like, this is something that, you need to care about. But I do think it's mindful for us, especially in this modern digital age that we are in. It is important for us to recognize that, yes, we have like our physical fitness, but we also have our social fitness, and that is also really important to invest in. The longest study ever on happiness found that your social relationships were the most important. And I think like that always just like blows me away. But here's one thing that I think about often. I have met so many women that are partnered and are lonely and a little like, maybe a little unhappy. I have never met somebody that is single and has like a fulfilling friend group that is like generally like unhappy with their lives, and granted, like it's a tapestry, right? There's a spectrum to everything, but I think that is something for us all to consider. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that your friendships need to be more important than your marriage. Not at all. That is not what I'm saying. That is your best friend. That is like the pinnacle of a lot of our triangles, right? Like as our main confidant, as our partner. But I do think, I'm really glad you said that, because I do think a lot of us get hung up on, oh, well, if it's temporary or if it's a little bit more fragile, it's not worth it. And it's so worth it. I mean, I know I'm on a rant. You really are really good at giving people space to talk. I know you said that earlier. You really, you really are. And one of my favorite examples of this is like one time I had a friend come over and my toilet started flooding and it got everywhere and we had to like hurry up and clean it and like do all this stuff. And when I tell you, we were laughing so hard, like that was one of my favorite memories of my entire life. And it was cleaning up toilet water, right? That's the gift that friendship can give us, y'all. Connection can give us.
Yeah, it's true. I could almost see that in my head. It almost sounds like a Friends episode. Right? Like you could almost see that happening. I totally understand. It's those little simple life events that as long as you're with someone together, that like make all the difference. Like had you been by yourself doing that, that would have been miserable. You're like, this stinks. I can't believe I'm cleaning this up. But if you're there with one of your like really close friends, you're like, look at how ridiculous this is that we are like ankle deep in toilet water.
Yes, exactly. I swear, whether it's like climbing up a mountain, you know, being at the top of the Eiffel Tower or cleaning up toilet water, if it's with your friends, it can be such a more powerful experience. Like experiences are better shared. So
they absolutely, I love that advice. And you know, it's interesting. I have an 11 going on 12-year-old son, and obviously he's getting to a point where his friends are very important to him.
Yeah.
But this new generation interacts with friends differently because they are digital natives than other previous generations. And I'll give you an example. His one friend had been under the weather. And I said, well, why don't you text her just to check in on her to see if she's like feeling better? And he was like, Mom, people don't do that nowadays. And I was like, no, yes, you should be doing that nowadays. Like, although the kids, I guess their social currency is a little bit different, but I'm trying to instill in him the social skills and the friendship skills, because really there are skills that go into being friends, right? With somebody. I'm trying to instill the friendship skills to him so that he is considerate, and that if you don't hear from somebody in a while, you check in on them and say like, oh, heard you weren't feeling well. How is everything? Are you feeling better? This and that. But I just thought it was so interesting where he said, no, people don't do that nowadays. People don't do that anymore. And I'm like, well, we're going to have to change that, aren't we?
Right. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a little scary actually.
That's what I thought too. And he'll have other friends who he won't hear from for, you know, weeks at a clip. And I'll say again to him too, like check in on them, like text them. And it's not that like he does, then he'll like reach out and be like, hey guys, like you want to do a call or something like that. But many times kids, and I don't know if it's just his friends, so I shouldn't make sweeping generalizations, but it seems to be that the kids are so involved with, you know, their video games or like what they're doing on that device that they're not thinking like, oh, let me call somebody else. Like when I was a kid, like you would call people and you'd be on the phone for hours, like just talking, or you would like watch a TV show simultaneously with your friends. And like that was always a lot of fun, right? Like we would like call each other and then like watch a show together separately in our own individual homes, but together. And I feel like, I don't know if people really necessarily do that anymore. They probably don't. But, you know, the kids are on the iPads and they're just focused on the games that they're playing. And they're not necessarily thinking of, you know, the outside world per se. And again, maybe, I don't know if it's just his friends or if it's just, you know, a generational thing. But when he said to me, no, people don't do that anymore, I was like, no, we have to change that. You do have to check in on your friends if you haven't heard from them in a few weeks.
Yeah. Okay, so we have found, again, like I did this, but studies have found that, like, for example, when the TV was introduced, we stopped spending as much time in our communities. And since smartphones have, you know, you've been made smart, if you will, and we have like this, because really these like media, like numbing devices in our hands all of the time, overstimulate. We get more stimulation in a day than people like 100 years ago got in their entire lifetime.
That's
you know,
wild.
That's so wild. It's a little disorienting, honestly.
It is, actually. It is.
Yeah. So I do think that's part of it. It's something there's multiple factors, but like, you know, for adults, right, even like working from home. And I think for the younger generation as well, like being like going through COVID, I think the impact that it had actually was that we became a little bit more dependent on those devices, on those things. And one thing that I say often, one thing that I feel like I'm like fighting against is like our culture of isolation, because truly that's what we've started to create. Is we've had a loneliness epidemic for a while, even before the global pandemic where we were all alone in our houses. Loneliness was really high. It has been steadily increasing since the 1970s. And now we know that social anxiety is increasing. It's like becoming our new normal. And what happens a lot with social anxiety is we also avoid social situations. And so, right, I love that you talked about it as skills too, because it is a skill. And for everybody listening, right, like that's one thing I'm so big on, like, yeah, it's your social fitness, like being able to be in a park and talk around people. It could be so much easier, Tara, to just like sit in your home and to not. But then, y'all, again, that loneliness impact is huge. It's huge. And nobody needs to shame themselves if they are feeling lonely. Nobody needs to think, oh, something is wrong with you. It's honestly, a lot of it is wrong with our culture right now, with our societal systems right now. With these devices, I hope, like when the car was introduced, I think Meghan Markle said this, but when the car was introduced, they were like, oh, people are getting in accidents and bad things are happening. So we need to have seatbelts for everybody, right? Like seatbelt was not an initial thing. We need to have some kind of seatbelt for our phones, I swear. But
absolutely.
I do think for the younger generation as well, I think it's really awesome that you're instilling that in him, because one thing that I do get often, it's kind of interesting actually. I get a lot of women that are older than me and that have looked up and have been like, where did my friends go? Like, right? And then I get a lot of people that are younger than me that are like, I can't talk to other people. So I'm really glad you touched on that.
Well, I'm really glad that you do the work that you do, though, Jewel, because it's so needed. That's why I just wanted to like chat and really like pick your brain. Where can everyone find you? Where can they listen to your podcast? All of those things.
Yes. And we're going to have Tara on the podcast, which I'm so excited about. So y'all are going to have to listen.
So excited.
It's going to be so fun. So the podcast is called The Socially Delightful Podcast. So you can find that. It's everywhere that you listen to podcasts. And you could find me at connectionwithjewel.com. If I could leave everybody with a couple of things. One, we have a really great training that my team and I are so proud of. We used it at the largest women's conference in our state. We were so proud to do it. It got everyone so excited. So we turned it into a couple trainings. And so if you go to my website and you sign up for my email list, we'll send you our trainings, which are how to belong at any event, how to create more of that feeling in your body, and how to turn people you meet into friends. And
I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, we're so proud of it. If I could leave everybody with that training, that would be awesome. I can send you the link for that.
Yeah.
But also, for every mom listening, I know that y'all have like so much on your plates and you have so many expectations. And one thing that I just really want, if anybody took anything from this episode today, because the last thing I want to do is feel like I'm adding another thing to your plate, So if I could just offer for anybody, you deserve to feel connected and supported. And, way back in the day, hundreds of years ago, moms were working together in a village, right? It was, hey, you watch the kids while I go make food, right? We had such a village and such a community. And so if you are struggling with motherhood right now, if you were feeling lonely right now, you are absolutely not alone. There are some things you can do. Hopefully you could take some things that we talked about today. But I also just really want to normalize that, because when it comes to social relationships and connection, we can feel a lot of shame about it. And you do not need to feel any shame.
Beautifully said, Jewel. I just want to like jump through the phone and give you like the biggest hug right now.
Same. I'm so glad I get to talk to you again.
I know, me too. It's going to be fun. So thank you so much for being here, though. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate this conversation because, like I said, friendship is something that is near and dear to my heart, as it should be for most people, right? Like I love nothing more than making new friends and supporting my friends. And now with your training and different things like that, it's going to get out there and more people could be able to do the same thing. So I love it, Jewel. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest. and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you could head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow, or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our FlexPath learning format lets you learn on your own schedule. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.